my time. I paid for my crime.
I want to say a big good evening going out to each and every single one of you right across the globe tonight.
I paid for my crime.
It's another edition of Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin Julian and I'm so glad to be here with you.
Already did my time. I paid for
Tonight's theme, Justice for Anthony.
already did.
Wrong time of death. Wrong time for death is what we've themed this show tonight. And as we discuss this,
I didn't really care about
the theme will become evident
survive.
by the evidence we provide.
I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my
On a week where
women and women. I had girls all over the street.
the Caribbean was
Life was so sweet.
hit with catastrophic hurricanes
Didn't rearrange.
which swept through the Caribbean and
No gun in my hand.
headed its way into
No gangster. Life is too short to
the south side of America from Miami and Florida and right up through to South Carolina,
already
causing destructions in its path. Hurricane Irma
did.
left death and destruction in its wake.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for
On a week where terrorism has hit England and London once again,
already did my time. I paid for my crime.
fortunately, no fatalities on this particular attack at Parsons Green.
Fly, but I never got
22 or 29 injured,
what I had to do.
taken to hospitals for various types of injuries.
To repent, I must admit, I was doing
On a week where Donald Trump has been rebuked once again
thinking over since I've gotten older.
for his mindless
I wouldn't do it.
comments and tweets.
Done, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out.
And on a week where I celebrate 11 years married to my wonderful wife. It's Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
Could be facing life in
Stay with us.
prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet.
On a week when North Korea sends out another
I'm a champ.
nuclear missile into the
And
Pacific Ocean,
no gangster, life is too short to spend it on.
taunting and terrorizing its neighbors.
And I cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
On a week when Bangladesh cries out for help with the genocide taking place in Rohingya,
Paid for my crime.
Rohingya, however you pronounce it.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply.
And on a day when a 14-year-old girl
To you and you,
is raped in broad daylight in the United Kingdom, England.
shit. Now sit back.
These are your issues today.
The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time, already did my time.
First and foremost, I want to say a big thank you to all of you who support, encourage,
The opening statements are going on right now.
take part in Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
Prison.
I want to thank you because it's your stories that help us keep these things up front.
Trying to cope with this living hell.
And our hope is that we give you a platform to tell a story that opens the eyes of the world.
Trying to cope with this living hell.
And potentially frees another innocent person. My name is Kervin Julian. This is Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, and we are live, coming to you from Coventry, United Kingdom, going out to you all over the world.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but
my guest today, Catherine Prettyman,
for thine is the kingdom, the power.
has an amazing story to tell.
Amen.
And I'm sure you're sitting on the edges of your seats, waiting to hear exactly what's going on here on Issues Today. Today, 16th of September 2017.
All those drive-by killings, stop them.
Justice for Anthony.
It ain't about nothing.
Wrong time for death.
He who was out sin, let him cast the first stone. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide, and put down those knives. Stop stabbing each other. Yeah.
World Jam Global Radio, this is clarity.
I just want to tell you the message that I received from Catherine Prettyman before we agreed to do this show, and I'm sure she won't mind me reading this, but this is the personal message that she sent to me, which touched me considerably and forced me to want to take on this subject. She said, we have been fighting this for a little over 3 years. That's Anthony, was convicted of first-degree murder, was sentenced to life without parole. They had absolutely no evidence. The judge allowed in a prior bad act, and almost every witness only testified about that bad act. Since we have had state witnesses come forward and sign affidavits stating that they were pushed to lie on stand, the coroner stated that the victim had been dead for a few hours prior to being found, and detectives made a circumstantial case to say he killed her greater than 60 hours before that. There is so much more as well to tell, and my response to her was, you have my attention. Catherine Prettyman, you have my attention. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day it is where you are. I'm so glad that you could join us here live on World Jam Global Radio on our program Issues Today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. Now, please do tell our audience just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do from day to day, and the reason why you're here.
Well, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, centered in the middle of the country. I'm a nurse, a nephrology nurse. I help dialysis patients daily. I have 4 children with Anthony, our oldest being 16. We have a 15-year-old also who's a type 1 diabetic, so we have daily struggles there. And then we have 2 small boys, 6 and 5. So my life kind of centers around work, them, and trying to obtain justice for Anthony.
Wow, and again, at the beginning of this, I read it out, and you've been doing this for a little over 3 years. Is that how long he's been incarcerated now?
Yes, sir. He was arrested 2014.
Okay. So before
May 21st,
before we talk about the case, Catherine, let's talk about a little bit about Anthony. You're married to Anthony, right? How long have you guys been married?
we're actually engaged. We are getting married on November 29th, 2017, as a year. It's been set for about a year and a half now. We've been together, I want to say 18 years ago was when we first started dating.
So
it's been a while.
So we're talking about a man you know.
Yes, sir.
This is a man you've grown
I know
up with.
very well.
This is a man that has fathered your children. This is a man that you're in love with. This is a man that you've a relationship with. This is not a man that you've just met by pen letter. This is not a man that you met moments before he was arrested or convicted. This is a man that you've known for a very long time.
Yes, sir. Very long time.
So tell us a little bit about Anthony. What was he like? What did he do? What was his schooling like? What was his education like? Where was his career going? What type of man was he?
Well, he doesn't have. He has a hard beginning in life. His father actually was in prison for 25 years. So Anthony didn't really have a good relationship with him. He kind of grew up in the streets, got involved in the gang life very early. Was involved in gangs and in drugs. Did some time for selling drugs at a younger age. When I met him, he was 28. And he had some, I'm not going to paint a pretty picture. I'm going to paint what it is. He had some anger issues, and he had some violence issues. I want to say about 5 or 6 years into our relationship and our children, I told him he had to get some counseling. He had to get some help. He was willing, and we did go to counseling together. And I would say about after that point, he struggled a little bit in areas, but never was he physically abusive. He was trying to pay his child support and take care of his kids, working, hanging drywall, paving streets. He would work at night, towing trucks. Originally he actually has a national championship football ring. He had played some football. He did a little walk-on training camp down at the Seattle Seahawks. Just getting in trouble early in life really kind of set his path in a way that he's tried to correct in the past 10 years or so.
Catherine, let me start off by telling you, most people a lot of people here in the UK know this about me, but you guys wouldn't know this about me. I may be a respected broadcaster presenter on World Jam Global Radio, but I was a drug addict and an alcoholic for 36 years. I was a criminal, a crook, a drug dealer, a drug user, a gun carrier, a gang member, and had convictions for over 30 years, up until 12 years ago. So they say that a leopard can't change his spots, but I respond with, I'm not a leopard, and neither is Anthony. So for me,
right,
your past doesn't dictate your future, and people do change and can change. So if you're telling me that Anthony had a bad upbringing, well, at 14 years, my first offense was attempted murder. At 14 years of age, that was my first conviction. And I had over 30 years of convictions long after that. My last conviction was in 2005. So, don't allow what he did before to distract people from the type of man that he was becoming. Right. Okay?
Right, and that's, I just want people I want to be up front and let people, because there are a lot of people who know Anthony, who know his history, who know his past.
Yeah.
And they're and that's the first thing they're going to say, well, she's not being, but I am. He people who know him know, but they also know, they've seen the change, and he was making changes.
I often say, Catherine, I'm celebrating 11 years marriage with my wife today. My wife was a volunteer in the rehabilitation center that I was in when I was rehabilitating myself from drugs, and she was a volunteer, and my wife saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and helped me to grow into the better man that I've become. Not needing to lead the life that I'd led before, and I'm not saying that I might not have found my way had I not met her, but I probably wouldn't have found my way as quickly as I did. So women seem to have a good judge of character, and if you saw something good in this man, then I'm willing to take your stake on this. So please just tell us a little bit about Anthony and his growing up. And yes, I know you want to tell it like it is, but he wasn't just a gangbanger. Otherwise, unless you're going to tell me that you fell in love with him because he was a gangbanger, he must have been a gentle man.
No.
He must have been a loving man. There must have been things about him that attracted him to you. And I want to hear about these things.
I tell you what, he would give you the shirt off his back. He would find homeless people and bring them home and feed them. He would go out in the dead of winter and find people who's single moms, single women that could not get out of their car, were stuck in. He would shovel them out and dig them out. And I mean, that's just who he was. He was very kind. He had a very, I know that he had a wall built around him, and to a lot of people, he was just this big, tough guy. But if you knew him, you'd know that if you needed him, he would be there for you.
I've known some big, tough guys over the years, from my growing up right up until now, and some of the most hardest of men that I've come across are some of the most loving of men that you'd ever care to meet. So what type of a boyfriend was he for you?
Well, on and off. In the beginning, it was a struggle. He had a very big problem with infidelity. And to be perfectly honest, when he went to prison for this, when he was arrested, him and I were not boyfriend and girlfriend. We were on a parenting plane only. Friendship parenting plane was something that I decided because I felt like he needed to grow up a little bit. So to say that I even took his side because I was with him wasn't the case, because I wasn't even with him at that time.
That makes perfect sense to me. I get it. I get it. Totally get it. My wife would absolutely resonate with that story with you. She struggled with me for many years. In fact, at times she'd probably tell you that she still struggles with me now. But I love her dearly, and she loves me dearly, and that's all that matters. What type of a father?
Right.
What type of a father was he, Catherine?
He's an excellent father. I mean, just very caring, very concerned about his children, trying to be a part of their life. Obviously he had problems with some of his other, his ex-wife and her kids, and he always just tried, though. He would go cook meals, try to be there when the mother was at work, and make sure the kids did their chores and their homework, and just really tried to be a part of all of their lives and have them grow up in such a way where they had some self-esteem and they didn't get involved in the gangs and things like that, growing up to know each other and to have a relationship with each other and to be respectful of their elders.
Okay. Did you have any brothers and sisters, Catherine?
He has three brothers, but he also has some stepbrothers and things that he does not know very well, and I could not give count of those. They are his father's children, and I did not know him very well before he passed, his dad. But with his mother had 4 sons. So
Okay.
he does have 3 other siblings.
And how did he get on with his family as a whole?
He gets along well with his family. His family has always loved him. He's always been there for them, anything they need, paying their mortgage for them when they needed, getting their car out of hock when they needed, just anything. He was always there for them.
You see, for me, I don't just like to talk about the case. I like to personalize and characterize the individual so that we can get a sense of the man that we're talking about. Because most people will only
Right.
get to know what they read in the papers or what they heard during the trial and what the prosecutors had to say about him. But we don't often get to hear about the man behind the man. And this is an opportunity for you to personalize Anthony's story so we can get to know him in a different way. So as we begin to hear what he's been accused of, what he was convicted of, and what he's serving time for, we can form our own opinions as to
Right.
as to how we feel about him and what he's gone through. Do you understand what I mean? Because I would imagine
sir.
I would imagine the prosecution would have painted him out to be a real gangster who had lived a real bad life and had done some bad things in his life. And I'll tell you something, Catherine. I've done some very bad things in my life. My life story is on Google. It's on the internet if people wanted to Google it and find out for themselves. There's no hidden corners with me. But my past doesn't define who I am. And I think
Right.
if we were all to be thought of and judged on who we were, none of us would ever get anywhere in life, because we've all got a skeleton somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
so
sir.
in all sense of purpose, it sounds like Anthony was pretty much your normal average guy. He had a family. He made some mistakes in his life. He had turned those round. He'd become and let's get this right. His infidelity doesn't make him a bad man. It means that
That's
he made
right.
some wrong choices, but it doesn't make him a bad man. Yeah?
Doesn't make him a murderer.
No.
Right.
Right? So let's just get that part right. And had he had any convictions for serious violence disorder prior to this case?
He had one conviction. Actually, it will come into play in the case approximately a year and a half prior to the murder. He did 1 year in jail. He pled guilty for his first domestic ever. It was his first domestic. He punched the victim in the face. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I know it's, like I said, it was very out of ordinary for him because he had not been doing anything like that. And I don't know what happened, but he did plead guilty to it, and he did do this year.
Let's hang on a minute. I've punched a lot of people in the face, and most of the time I've not gone to court or jail for it. When
it's a female, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I get that. Fortunately for me, it's one of the things that I refuse to do. It's one of the things that I think is taboo for me. It's one of the things that I detest. I detest a man that puts his hand on a woman, and unfortunately, on this case, I would detest Anthony for putting his hands on any woman, but that still wouldn't make him a murderer. All right? It's unsavory, it's distasteful, unliking, and very unfortunate that and I don't know. And even if you were to explain to me the contents of that sequence of events that took place before he punched her in the face or whatever, I still wouldn't justify him punching her in the face, whatever she did, whoever she was, and however much she provoked him. Because I've had worse done to me,
Correct.
and I still refuse to raise my hand to a woman. It's not what a man should do. But still, I would not consider a man to be capable of murder because he was to raise his hand on a woman. Because let's just get it straight. Most men that raise their hands on women are not the type of men that you'll find fighting and rolling around with men in the grass, right?
Correct.
Because most people will find them to be very cowardly indeed, which is my opinion of men who put their hands on women. But let's not go there, because I'm not here to judge him on that either, right? So he may well have a history of domestic violence, or not even a history, but there's obviously a conviction. But that past conviction
Right.
does not hold water. That doesn't.
Right. At 42, his first conviction. His first ever domestic.
Yeah, well, I don't have domestic violence, but I have serious offences, including armed possession of arms and ammunition and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not going to go into it right now because I don't need to. But what I'm saying is, I'm not going to condemn or judge him based on the fact that he's got a conviction late in his life for a domestic violence issue, because I am not in possession of all the information that took place. I've actually had a woman break my nose. I've had a woman spit in my face. I've had a woman throw an iron bar in my face, but I still will not resort to responding to violence. And I've been known. The women that I've been with in the past will tell you that I've been known. In an argument with a woman, I will go outside and I'll pick a fight with a man, and I'll take it out on him instead.
Right.
That's me. That's the
Right.
type
And
of-
he's he admitted he was wrong. He shouldn't have done it, regardless of the circumstance. Like he said, he pled guilty and he did his time.
But that doesn't make him a murderer. Okay, so let's just stop that there. Yes, I don't want to prolong this conversation about domestic violence because I don't want to be painting a picture of him that prejudices anybody's thoughts on him as an individual when we talk about what we're about to talk about now. So, let's talk about the case in question. Give me some background, not on Anthony, but on the victim and the platform that we're going to set, the stage we're going to set for this particular death and end of life of this individual.
Okay, well, the victim was 38 years old at the time. She actually knew her fairly well, had been friends with her. Her and Anthony had dated on and off for about 12 years. She worked as a certified nurse's assistant. She had some issues. I'm not going to bring those up because I don't feel like that's, it's not ever good to speak ill of the dead. But there were issues that she had that had they been brought into trial, maybe a little bit more, the jury would have, had some other things to think about. But anyway, she was found on a Sunday morning, May 18th, 2014, actually on my daughter's 13th birthday. She was found deceased in her apartment by the police at approximately 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning after a well call from her work when she did not show up to work on Saturday and she did not show up to work on Sunday.
How was she diagnosed as dying? What was the coroner's report? What was
blunt force trauma. She, according to multiple sharp force injuries to the head with multiple comminuted skull fractures and lacerations. According to the coroner's report, there were approximately at least 12, probably more because they were overlapping, blows to the head with a sharp, heavy object.
Was Anthony seeing her at the time?
Not at the time. They were on and off again. I cannot say that week if they were on or they were off because I wasn't with him. According to the text messages between the two that were introduced in trial, there was some back and forth. She said, "You don't call me, you don't respond to my text messages." He says, "You're doing this, you're doing that. I don't appreciate the drinking. I don't appreciate this. I don't appreciate that." So I can't speak for that because I wasn't there. I can only say what the text messages say.
Would it be fair to say that Anthony was not in love with her?
I can't speak to that either.
Okay.
I know that he was dating somebody new at the time. He had just started seeing her approximately a month before that. And I know that he spent a lot of his time with her.
Okay, let's just try and just space this out a little bit. Just sort of let's be honest here. Most game players, most men that have more than one woman, right? If she had been his main woman, those text messages that you talk about would not have been contextualized in the way that they were, right? Because it's right. What I'm hearing is he is not responding to her. She is obviously calling for him, messaging him, requesting his presence, or asking him to call more often or come and see her more often, and she's not getting a response. That doesn't sound like the behavior of a man that's madly in love with a woman.
Correct. And to the girl that he was currently seeing, when the police interviewed her, she did tell, and I'm just reading straight from the police report. Anything you hear me say, I'm going to read straight from a report, pretty fine. Much. Straight from the police report says she told Detective blank and blank that she believed Anthony was innocent of the murder, and that she knew that he had problems with the victim, who would, in quotes, blow his phone up.
Right. So
apparently, yeah.
So if she was that kind of possessive, obsessive individual, is it not possible that the rejection that she was feeling, or the behavior that she displays, is something that might be pertinent to other relationships that she might have been having with other people at the same time.
Well, yeah, and it comes out in testimony, and since that there were multiple other boyfriends. In fact, a boyfriend that lived underneath her in the same apartment complex.
Now hear this clearly, because I don't have any of this information available to me. So I'm not reading from a script. I'm just telling you based on what you've just said to me, and the characterization that I'm hearing. I would already assume that this is an obsessive, stalking kind of woman who obviously has multiple relationships, and Anthony wasn't the only one that she was seeing.
That is correct. That would be an accurate assumption. Yeah.
So, for the life of me, I just get stuck when people don't see things as clearly as I do. That's all. Forgive me for being so blatant.
Yeah,
right?
that's okay.
So, why was Anthony connected to her death in the first place? How was he connected?
Well, let me say this. Anthony was not physically or by evidence connected in any way, shape, or form. There were no witnesses. There was no DNA left at the crime scene. There was no blood. That they tested, there was nothing. And we'll get into that in a minute. What happened was Anthony had a girlfriend at the time that he had about 10 of them, I would say, when he got arrested. One of the girls that he'd been dating on and off and had a child with, the police interviewed her, went to her house and interviewed her. And at the time, she lived in her mother's basement. They pulled her aside, according to the police report. And again, I'm reading straight from the police report. Detectives blank and blank sat down in the dining room area alone with this person to question her about Burries. In which time she says on Friday morning at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, he comes from the bar, picks her up, she takes him home, drops him off, she goes home, she does not hear from him again until Friday at approximately 11 o'clock in the morning. The police also interviewed and interrogated me at that time and a couple of his other girlfriends and friends, in which they find that the only opening that they have where he does not have an alibi, where he is at home alone, is for those approximate 2 to 3 hours from 3:30 in the morning till about 5:30 in the morning. For 2 hours, he's at home alone. And so that is where they put her time of death.
But that wasn't actually her time of death, right?
That is correct. The coroner in testimony does not, on the autopsy, he will not give a time of death, which is actually, he's not the coroner, he's the pathologist, which was a little strange to us. I know that coroners do not give times of death, but a pathologist is trained. From everything that I have read, they are trained, and they are trained to give a time of death or an approximate. So when our attorney cross-examined him, he does state 12 to 18, could be 24 hours that she's been dead. He said it's a very vague estimate, but that would be the estimate he gave. We did not realize at the time of trial, because it never is brought out, that he did not do the autopsy until the following day, Monday, May 19th. So we're talking about even 24 hours after that is when this autopsy is occurring. So we're actually saying, the police are saying it happened at 3 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and the autopsy is not done until Monday. There's a lot of things in his autopsy that are not, that make it kind of impossible for that to be the case.
Okay, so let's go through some of the things that make it impossible for it not to be the case.
Okay, so we have the fact that rigor mortis is not present at the time that the body is found. Anyone who knows.
So that would make the time of death.
We would say less than, from a medical standpoint, rigor mortis usually sets in within the first 12 hours
Correct.
of death. Obviously, depending on where the body's found. If the body's found.
So at the time that they found the body, if you was to trace that back, there's absolutely no way that she could have died within the time frame that they've given.
Well, yeah, that's correct. There's also, we actually have a text message from her to him after the time of death.
After we need to clarify this. You have a text message from her to him after the time of death that the police have tried to state was the time that she died.
Yes, sir.
Right. So that knocks their theory out of the ballpark. If they're saying that she died at 3:00, unless they're saying that he went in and used her phone to text himself from her phone in order so that he can have a text and then text her back to cover his tracks. Is that what they were suggesting?
He was with somebody. No, he was actually with somebody when he got that text message in. But what they suggested, their theory was that he put his phone in airplane mode.
So the text message only came on later because it was in airplane mode.
That's what they suggested. But you'll have 3 state witnesses that will get up and testify that in the time that his phone is supposed to be in airplane mode, he is calling and texting and speaking with them.
Okay.
State witnesses, not our witnesses.
But there's another way to verify this, right? There is another way that there is another way to verify this. Irrespective of his airplane mode on his phone, the time that it was sent on her phone should be quite evident.
Well, the problem with that was when they originally got her phone, they couldn't get into it because her charging port was broken and there was something wrong with the face. So the original time was the time that it came to his phone, was the time he got it. This is, again, one of the issues that we have. A year later, we have the messages that Sprint sent and Verizon sent, and that's the time that is on time-stamped on there, the time that it gets to his phone. However, a year later, right approximately a week before we're getting ready to go to trial, the prosecution introduces this new evidence that they've sent the phone to out of state. They put it in an envelope, mailed the phone out of state to a university that put it on some sort of thing that abstracted all this information that they could not get, that says that the message left her phone at 3:40 in the morning.
But surely the server should be able to verify that time, irrespective of any university or any prosecutorial evidence that they bring forward.
They did not go off the server. They went off of what they pulled from their machine. It's called Cellbrite.
That's fine, but why hasn't his defense gone through to the server?
His defense did not do anything that we asked them to do at all.
Okay, that's fine. Because for me, if that's the evidence that they're bringing forth, right, based on anything, then I would have counteracted that by going to the server, who would have had the direct source, and said this was the time that it was sent, and this is the time that he received it, because they would have been able to, her server and his server would have been able to verify that time, if that's the evidence that they're entering into court.
Correct. And like I said, and again, even without that, his lawyer did not even bring up the fact that your phone can't be in airplane mode if you're making phone calls and texting people.
So what part that they realize that when your phone goes into airplane mode, it means that you actually have no service whatsoever. It means not only can you not receive, but you cannot make any calls, you cannot receive any calls, you cannot make any texts, you cannot receive any texts, you cannot get any data information through your phone whatsoever if you're in airplane mode.
Correct. That is correct. And I don't think that, I'm not going to say the jury didn't understand that. With the statement I am going to make about his jury, and I don't like to do this, and it was a challenge that was thrown, is the fact that we had an all-white jury.
Okay. I understand that fully. Believe you me, I totally understand that fully. What I don't understand is why the technical information was not challenged, because the technical information could be quite easily challenged by any professional who knew what they were dealing with as far as a mobile phone or modern technology is concerned. And that airplane mode theory should have been challenged 100%.
correct. And we actually had a special witness that dealt with the cell phones, and he did not use him. Our lawyer decided not to use him and put him on the stand.
Okay. So now you're having this evidence being admitted to court, which sounds absolutely contrary and contradictory to common law practice and what we might know. So tell us some more. How does this story progress? How does this continue to generate into almost a conviction?
Well, what they had was they had the prior bad act, which he shouldn't have been allowed in because he did not testify. So there was no chance for him to get on stand and give his side of that situation. So it should have never came in. What they did was they said that they used a clause in the law basically that says he's domestically violent. It's a history of domestic violence, and that shows motive and premeditation, and that's how we bring this in. So what they did was they used that to have neighbors and things that saw her after that confrontation and they brought them up on the stand to talk about what she looked like in that moment right after that happened, and how she was scared of him. And they used a lot of hearsay. A lot of witnesses that got up and said, she said this, or I overheard this, or things like that. And that's really, they kind of made him out to be a bad, in quotes I'm going to put, because in the opening statement, the prosecution said, yeah, we went after him right away because, as you're going to see, he's a bad man. I mean, that was their opening statement.
Here's the thing. You mentioned the fact that it was an all-white jury, and I said to you that I fully understand what that is. My claim to fame as far as wrongful convictions is concerned was about a case that took place back in 1988 here in the United Kingdom, and I became the chairman of the campaign for a case called the Cardiff 3, later to be known as the Cardiff 5. And it was about a murder that took place of a white woman in South Wales, here in the United Kingdom. And for 10 months, the chief of police here in the UK was on national TV, petitioning and asking for the whereabouts of a white man that was seen sitting on the steps of the particular property where the body was found, with blood on his hands. And for 10 months they searched for this man. They gave a photo identity kit of this man. They put up this photo shot of this man, and for 10 months they searched for this man. And then they wanted to rejuvenate the community, and the local council put in over £50 million to help rebuild this community. But this murder was outstanding, and investors said that they would not invest in this community or bring their business to this community while this murder was outstanding. So pressure was put on the police to close this case, get this case dealt with. Let's get it out the way. And after 10 months, they couldn't find this white man that they were looking for. So the local community was a black community. It was a 98% black community. They went into that community and they arrested 3,000 black men. They took them all into the police stations, and then they whittled them down to 5. And they put these 5 together and charged them with this girl's murder. There was no forensic evidence. Don't forget, this girl was raped. She was cut and stabbed over 50 times. They had semen. They had fingerprints in blood. They had blood. They had all sorts of forensic evidence to attach to an individual or persons attached to this crime. None of the forensic evidence that they had matched the 5 men they had in the dock. These men were taken out of state to another state to an all-white jury. And in this particular town, the newspaper only came out once a day at 12 o'clock midday. So what they arranged for was for the prosecution to present their case every morning and for the defense to rebuttal every afternoon. So the defense would come in, the prosecution would come in the morning and bring their witnesses, and they would bring forth their case, and then the newspapers would rush off at 12 o'clock to go and print it in their afternoon newspapers, because they didn't come out in the morning, they only came out in the afternoon. It was an afternoon paper, national newspaper. So when the defense came in to rebuttal or to challenge whatever the prosecution had brought forward, none of that was reported. So the jury only got to read the newspapers on what the prosecution had presented. That's what they had to refresh their memories with each day. And
Right.
after the longest trial in British history, after the most expensive trial in British history, which cost over £6 million, these individuals, 3 of the 5 were found guilty, 2 of them were acquitted and were sentenced to life for a murder. And we campaigned for 4 years before we were able to get them free, because they were tried in an all-white jury. And let me just say this. The prosecution opened up with this statement, because bearing in mind that this woman was cut, sliced, she was almost decapitated, her breasts were sliced off, and there was over 60 stab wounds to her body. The prosecution opened up with this statement: these guys in this community carry knives in their pockets like we carry handkerchiefs. And that was to put an image on this all-white jury who had never lived in a cultural community, a prejudicial view of what these individuals lived like.
Right.
So I fully understand what you mean when you say that he was presented to an all-white jury, because the moment they started to raise this domestic violence issue against a woman, their view would have already been tainted and prejudiced.
Yes, sir. Well, and let me just tell you a couple other things that we had that had the jury been listening. We had witnesses. We had 2 state witnesses that said they saw the victim alive. One on Friday at 7:30 in the morning, described what she was wearing, described that she stopped and talked to her, that she pet her dogs. And one on Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon. The one on Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon, the police never made a report on that. We found that on our own, and when questioned about it, they said that it was included in her son's interview. I'm looking at the interview right now. It just says interview of party 1 and the son's name, and then at the end of the interview it says end of interview with and the son's name. Never is a party 2 mentioned. Never is anything about this son's mother mentioned at all, or the fact that she saw Tina alive at 2:30 in the afternoon that Friday. When questioned on the stand, like I said, the detective said that they interviewed them together, and that's why there was never a separate report made. When the son was placed on the stand and questioned, and Anthony's attorney said, so when the police interviewed you 2 together, he said, oh no, he said, the police did not interview us together. He said, they separated us. And they interviewed my mother first, and then they interviewed me. Now, when it came time for trial, and we're talking about an elderly woman, she was in her 70s. When it came to trial, we could not find her. And her son did not know where she was.
Wow.
But they lived together, and she was an elderly woman. So we have, those 2 things. We also have alibi witness. The Wednesday night prior to that, they had somebody get on the stand and say that they heard the victim in her apartment arguing with an active party that was male that was in her apartment. And they made it seem like that was Anthony. While at the same time, we had an alibi witness, this other girl that he was dating, sitting out in the hallway, ready to testify with evidence that they were in another state at that time at the movie theater. We have a state witness who testified that on Thursday afternoon that the victim had bruises on her arms up and down. The prosecution made it out like they happened that Wednesday night during the argument. That witness has since come forward and testified and signed an affidavit saying that the state forced her to lie, that those bruises were months and months, could have been a year before that she had seen that she had bruises on her, and that she never knew where those bruises came from. Tina at no time ever said that they came from Anthony. But of course, the prosecution had to make it fit their illusion that here's this man that's domestically violent, that's terrorizing this woman and stalking her. And that's what they used. I mean, we have witnesses, we have alibi, and the lawyer, his lawyer never called the alibi witness. She sat out in the hallway and waited, and he never called her. We have the clothes. The police say that he burned the clothes from that night in the fireplace. The lawyer had those clothes in a box sitting on the table the entire trial and never introduced them. The lawyer still had the clothes.
I've done several of these types of stories on this show over the last 3 years, and I'm still speechless at the amount of times that I've heard about a lawyer, solicitor, barrister, however you prefer to terminologize it, who has had evidence available to challenge a conviction or a prosecution and has failed to do so. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why anybody would enter into this profession, do this job, and not want to represent the clients that they have sworn to defend. And I'm struggling with this in a very big way, because yours
and not only, I mean, I could go. We had the car that he supposedly went to this apartment in the middle of the night and committed this murder. And let me mind you, the window that they had was very narrow. So he committed this murder from the time he left the car till the time he came back to the car was 5 minutes at the most.
Wow.
So he left the car, went into a 2-story, had to go up 2 flights of stairs to get into the building, walk across the hall, gain entrance to the apartment, and then bludgeoned this girl to death. And the coroner stated had to be arm back, heavy blows, at least 12 times, came out with no blood on him, no evidence, left nothing there, no drips of blood down the hallway, no drips of blood in the apartment, nothing. Clean. And when it came time for our investigator, our lawyer, to have the car examined, when they were done with it, when they had torn it apart and done the luminol testing, which, by the way, if anyone knows anything about luminol testing, doesn't matter how much you clean a vehicle or anything else, it's going to detect blood 1 to 1 million.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm fully aware of that.
Detected nothing. Found no blood, found no DNA. When it came our time, they had sold the car out of evidence.
Wow.
We never even got a chance. The car, and that it became a big issue. It became a big part of the trial. That they did not preserve evidence.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they're just
the sheer incompetence of what we're hearing. So it would take you longer to go into a shop and buy a packet of cigarettes and get back to your car. And what they're suggesting is that this man left his car, went up to a 2-story building. Not only did he pulverize this woman with over 12 heavy-duty blows that was to end her life, but in that 5 minutes that it took to leave his car and get back to his car and beat this woman with this 12 heavy-duty blows, he also had enough time to clear up all the forensic evidence that could possibly suggest that he was ever there in the first place.
Correct. And they did some vaginal swabs on her. There were also some cigarettes, freshly smoked cigarettes and cigars that were next to her in open beer bottles that they swabbed. They never tested any of it.
What do you mean they didn't even test it?
They didn't even test it.
So is that evidence still available or not?
I hope so. That's what we're trying for now, is to get that tested, because we believe our theory, and we have some pretty good proof behind it. The man that lived underneath her had a domestically violent history. It's kind of crazy. His ex-girlfriend actually lived underneath me in the apartment complex that I lived in at the same exact time that this happened. So Omaha's kind of small. And she had to kick him out because he had beat her up. He had not only beat her up, but he had beat the man that lived upstairs up because he came down to check and see what was going on. Now, when the police went to question him, he had mysteriously lost his cell phone and his keys, the two items that they asked for.
Wow.
And he was supposedly had dinner with her at 2:00 in the morning that Anthony supposedly, according to the police theory, went over there and killed her.
Let me ask you this question. Is this gentleman black or white?
He is black. He's
Okay.
black as well.
So, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, and here's an opportunity for us to look into this even deeper. If they had another black suspect that is more likely to have committed the crime than Anthony, why weren't they willing to pursue that? What was it that they had with Anthony, or what was it about Anthony that made them wanted to pursue?
They had the prior.
Okay.
They had the prior. Not only did they have the prior, but he has done some work in the past for Omaha Police Department. And I'm not going to go into details on it, but he had done some work for them.
So would you go as far as to say that there appears to have been a personal reason why they pursued Anthony?
I can say this: they don't like Anthony, and so if I want to call that personal, I don't know if I would call it personal, but I know that even according to their own statements, they never looked at anybody else. And she had multiple boyfriends, not just the one in the basement.
Do you know?
But there's also
for those people that think that some of these stories are too far-fetched, let me explain another scenario to you, and hopefully you'll begin to understand how much I understand what you're going through. When I talk about this Cardiff 3 case, there was an individual by the name of Tony Parks, who was one of the original suspects charged or being interviewed for this murder, and they were looking to put him on trial. And he was one of those that had been arrested, interviewed, and he was named by all the witnesses as being present at this murder. Shortly before the case went to trial, Tony Parks was found dead on the motorway on another part of England, on the M50 to be precise, tossed out of a car. And the two witnesses that were giving their evidence were two white women, two prostitutes to be precise. And they had both named Tony Parks as one of these who was present at the murder and who was involved in the murder. And after Tony Parks' death, the very next statement that these two women made, Tony Parks' name was removed from the statement and replaced with a name that was very similar. The name of Tony Paris was introduced for the first time. Tony Paris became one of those that were convicted of the murder, later on to be found not guilty, exonerated, and set free. And Tony Paris's only crime was to have a name that would fit into the statement as easy as Tony Parks. And
Right.
some
Well, you find in this that I've done, there's a lot of redacting, a lot of things that are taken out, and a lot of things that are added in.
So have you found evidence that have been redacted from statements that have been taken out, and other things that have been put in?
We found evidence of the cell phone tampering.
Okay.
So far, that's
Now,
I'm sure there's more.
I don't want you to go into anything that might compromise your appeal or your defense or your attack. But please go into whatever you can. Explain what you mean by the evidence tampering.
Well, the evidence as far as the cell phone, we know just from the 2014 messages that came from Sprint. There were quite a few messages, but nothing that would ever have been any kind of led to anyone to believe that this occurred. However, a year later, in 2015, we've got a whole new set of messages that are in her phone, that this is the phone that they sent away, mind you, that were never in his phone, that don't appear in the deleted column that the company sends. There's a column that you get that says incoming, outgoing, and deleted. So any text messages that he would have deleted would have appeared in that column. Right. They were not there. They were never there. But all of a sudden now all of these messages appear in her phone to where he's texting her up until the time that they say she passed away.
Wow.
But they were not in the originals, and they were never, like I said, never in his phone.
So and are these messages being claimed to have been sent by him?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. It's obviously, it's hearsay, but
was it tied to his phone? Was it able to tie it to his phone?
It says in her phone that it came from his. Well, it doesn't say his number. It just says, I believe, Tony. I don't believe there's a number listed under it, if I recall correctly. Where is that? But as I said, they had their professional get on stand and basically say that what happens is when you text so many times, it gets to be 500 in his phone. In the case of his phone, it's 500. At 500 text messages, they begin to write over the old text messages because it's not going to store any more messages, and it's called an override. It's going to overwrite on it. However, it's not going to overwrite on the brand new messages.
No.
So they were never
but whether they overwrite the new messages or not, it would have been identified as coming from his phone.
Correct.
And they were not. Were they able to identify it coming from his phone?
All they were able to do, not in the original report, there was no messages in her phone. The messages that they say were in her phone in the second report were not in her phone in the first report.
Okay.
That's what we're saying.
So this is stuff that they've added afterwards.
Correct.
And have been
a year later, because the prosecution said we couldn't get around the fact that there were text messages sent to him after she was dead. That was their statement to the judge as to why they waited a whole year to send the cell phone out right a week before trial is to begin and come back with this new information.
Wow. It just doesn't make any sense at all, really.
Even then, the text messages aren't incriminating. They're nothing where he says, I'm going to kill you, I'm on my way to kill you. You know what I mean? They're not incriminating in that way. It's the fact that they're messages that were never there before.
Okay. So you have this, this seemingly tangible evidence that shows that they've been fraudulently manipulating the messages on the phone, trying to give an impression that there was this ongoing situation taking place just prior to her death. Is that what we're suggesting here? The messages were timed as
Yeah, we believe that the messages were added.
right, but the messages the messages that were added were claiming that they were having this conversation up until she died.
Yes, sir. But and if you'll note. Go ahead.
No, but those messages that they claimed that were taking place prior to her death was not there up until a year before.
Right until a week before, they were not there.
Which means it's totally impossible for those messages to be legitimate. Because if you send me a message to my phone today, I can show you tomorrow that's where that message is, and it's come from you, and there will be a traceability or exchange of thread. So in technical terms we call it a thread. So the thread would be you send me a message, I send you one back, you send me another one, I reply, you reply to that one, and I reply to that, and there's this whole thread of conversation that's taking place between us. Now, if you go and look tomorrow and it's not there, unless you're going to give me evidence that the server has been down for over a year, so has not been able to transmit that message, and that message never got sent because the server was down, then everything else that you say is a lie.
Right.
You understand where I'm coming from, yeah?
Right.
So, because I can't, even if I delete it from my phone and you delete it from your phone, the server, or for example, my iPhone, for example, backdate my phone, right? I can delete all these messages, but if I was to back up, if I was to go and back up my phone, back off the backup, it will put all those messages back in there again.
Right. Which is why we said if the messages were there, they would have been there a year prior.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was a big point for us. And like I said, the whole issue of sending the phone out of state, is also, it's never supposed to be sent out of chain of custody. A police officer should have carried that phone, and it should have been enclosed in what's called a paraffin bag, which is a copper-lined bag, which prevents anyone from going in and adding things to that phone, taking things from that phone. The phone was never placed in a paraffin bag. Any electronic item that can be digitally messed with is to be put in one of those bags.
Now, once again, we're not saying that Anthony was an angel, because he wasn't. Anthony had made some mistakes in his life. He'd messed up a few times. He had this previous for a domestic situation where he punched an ex. And we don't know the full story or circumstances surrounding that, irrespective of whether we support it or don't support it, agree with it or don't agree with it, detest it or not. We don't have the information surrounding all of that. But now, in order for them to be able to try and gain a conviction for murder, it appears that information is being fabricated, manipulated, and distorted in order for it to try and fit into some kind of framework that gives them an opportunity to try and present him as a guilty party in this.
Correct.
Okay, so take.
And also, I would like to say one other thing. Just in the evidence in the autopsy report. Again, mind you, Anthony only had 5 minutes, according to the state's theory, to do this, and the pathologist gets on stand and testifies to the fact that she has a black eye on autopsy that occurred, and he said because of the way the blood had pooled under the eye, you don't obtain bruises after you're dead. Once you're dead, nothing else bruises after that.
That's correct.
So if you pass away and you have a bruise when you pass away, it's already there. It has to be there already. He said that black eye occurred within 1 to 2 hours of her death. So within 1 to 2 hours of her death, if supposedly it happens at the time the police say it happens, Anthony is on camera at a bar in Omaha called the Candlelight.
So let's start talking about evidence that suggests Anthony could not have been at the scene of the crime. So we have this particular one that ties him up at this bar. Where did you say, Oklahoma?
The candlelight.
Right, the candlelight. Where is the candlelight?
It is probably 3 blocks from his house in South Omaha.
And how far from her place is this?
Approximately 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. So we just want to try to paint a picture so that our audience can really get an understanding of the distance. Did Anthony drive?
No, I'll just go ahead and go over the testimony here. What they say happened.
Yep.
He did not drive. He drove to this girl's house that he was currently seeing and has a son with, picked her up. She drove him home, dropped him off, and she says that she left and talked to him the next day when she dropped her son off for him to babysit when she went to work. The police take her downtown after that statement that she gives them. They take her downtown, and approximately 3 hours later, she comes up with a different statement where she says she dropped him off, then she went and got him some Burger King, approximately the Burger King that she listed is approximately 15 minutes from his house, and she says she sat in line for about 20 minutes. She came back. He's already outside. He gets in the car. He says, I need to talk to Tina. Take me to Tina's. At 3-something in the morning,
is Tina the victim?
Tina is the victim.
Okay.
This girlfriend of his takes him to the victim's house, where she says he exits the car, is gone for 2 to 5 minutes, returns to the car, nothing in his hands when he left, nothing in his hands when he came back. This is what she testifies to, and nothing on him. And then she says that she drives him over to Council Bluffs, which is another state, across the bridge into Council Bluffs to the casino, and then they come back to his house. If you take the time route, it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. There's no way that it happened like that.
Okay, I get that. So let's just break that down a little bit. Even if what they would suggest was true, because it sounds like her statement has changed, is shifted from one to another.
Right, and it changes 2 more times after she listens to his tapes. The police bring her down to the station and let her listen to his audio recordings with other females, and her statement changes 2 more times.
Okay, that's fine. We get that because that's what police do. But they've now reduced the amount of time that he had to kill her in and come away. Because what they've tried to do with her is they've wanted to place him at the scene of the crime. And what they've done is they've used her to place him at the scene of the crime. Right? So she's the innocent victim. She doesn't she doesn't want to incriminate herself in any way. She doesn't want to go to jail. She doesn't want to use. And did she have children, by the way?
They have one son together.
Yeah, the woman that drove him, right? They had one. So she possibly would have been threatened with losing her child, social care getting involved, and all the rest of that. And this is one way of her clearing that and getting all of that sort of stuff. But if he has only left her for 2 to 3 minutes to come back to the car, why was it not argued it would have been absolutely impossible for him to have carried out this dreadful attack, fatal attack, brutal attack, vicious, malicious, and extensive attack that was to have bludgeoned this woman to death, leaving her prostrate on the ground with blood pouring from all sorts of injuries she would have incurred from this absolutely terrible attack. And yet he would have come back to the car with this girlfriend sitting at the driving seat with no evidence on him whatsoever to suggest he had just been in an altercation.
Actually, his lawyer did kind of present that to the jury, the fact that it was not time-wise, it was not possible for that to have occurred. If he, his statement was, if Harmony's telling the truth, then this is not, then you're talking about someone going into this, gaining entrance from a 2 stories up, going in, doing this, coming back to the car, nothing on them, no evidence, no murder weapon. No murder weapon was ever found, by the way, and the keys in her purse were stolen and never found.
So here's the thing. Then the girlfriend that took him there, if he did that, then she was complicit to murder, because could have only been to protect their relationship, why she would have allowed him to go and do what he did in order for her to have her man. So, do you understand where I'm coming from with this?
I do.
The only way that the police could have justified her supporting him in going to her was that they were in a relationship that she was compromising, and this woman was complicit in this woman's extinguishing because it benefited her, because she now had him to herself. That could only be... What other reason could she possibly have for taking him over to a woman's house, committing such a violent murder, and just dropping him off home again?
Well, let me just tell you in her own words what she says when she's questioned with that. Again, like I said, she tells the police, she takes him there. In her third interview, she changed her story another time, and she says that she did not know that they were going to Tina's house, the victim's house. He just told her to drive to a certain area of town, and at that time, when they got to that area of town, that's when he tells her, I need you to take me to the victim's house apartment.
Okay, rewind. See, here we have. See, the first story, he said, take me to Tina's. I want to go to Tina's. Right? Mm-hmm. If he was to say that, that would suggest that she knew who Tina was.
And she did.
Okay. So, if she knew who Tina was, right, then when they arrived there, right, or when they got there, she would have already known where she was and who she was going to, or who he was going to. Because she knew who Tina was. So there's absolutely no way that they can claim that she didn't know that he was going to Tina's, or that they were at Tina's when she dropped him off. It makes no sense.
Correct.
Because
and then she says that she was scared for her life, and that she did not come forward to the police because she was scared for her life, that he was going to kill her. And then the next day, mind you, she drops her son off at his house for him to watch, and then spends that night with him.
Because that's obviously how afraid she was. She must have been so terrified of him that he would kill her, right, that she had to go and spend the night with him. And obviously, the son that she loves very dearly risked leaving him with him in the hope that he would kill him instead of her. Because if she lost a child instead of herself, that would be okay, right? Because at least she would be alive, because she's that thoughtless, she's that callous, she's that selfish that she wouldn't care about anybody else but herself. And as long as he killed somebody else and not her, she was actually okay with that. Is that what they're trying to suggest?
I don't know what I don't know what they're trying to suggest. I just know what the events that happened after she said she was scared for her life. So yes, apparently that's what they're suggesting, is that she was scared for her life, and yet it was okay for her to drop her son off over there.
And any woman worth their salt, whether they were scared or not. So, hang on a minute. I need to stop a minute, because we're jumping the gun again, aren't we? What was she scared of? Are you saying that she is implying that she is aware of what he did?
She says in her second statement to the police, is it the second statement or the second or third statement, she states that on the way to Council Bluffs, he makes her drive through a local area, which cuts down the time actually as well, makes the time even smaller. Makes her drive through a local area and makes her pull over at a house, at which point he turns to her and yells at her and tells her, if you tell anybody, you'll be an accessory.
If you tell anybody about what? See, at this point,
She says she doesn't she says she doesn't know.
right, but she knows Tina. She knows where Tina lives. She's at Tina's house. She knows that Tina has an on-off relationship with him, and she doesn't know that that's where he's going. I'm not seeing how that can't be tied up if that's what they're trying to suggest.
Right. Well, and that was also one of our issues was if this really happened and why was she not charged?
Absolutely, because she would be complicit at the very least.
Right. Or why was there not some deal put on the record that they made with her? Should have been some paperwork, something. We should have had something if that's what they're saying that this really happened.
That he forced her to take her there and threaten her with her life if she didn't comply and support what he was about to do. But then, if that being the case, right, once she had dropped him off and he was no longer with her, would not her first thought be, not so much because we know what we people are like in our black community. We're not the type of people that run to the police and go, "Hey, help, guess what happened here?" But wouldn't you just run for your life? Go and find somewhere where he can't,
Yeah.
at the very least, or go somewhere where you know he won't come to because he'll be too scared to come. I'll go to my mama's house because he ain't coming to my mama's house because my mama.
Well, and she lived with her mother, so.
Yeah. So therefore, he
an
ain't
issue,
coming
but-
to her mama's house to come and intimidate her because her mama gonna run him.
Right, and not only that, but like I said, the next day she drops her son off with him, and then that night I believe he actually stayed the night at her house, in her mother's house.
Oh.
That night.
Because that's how afraid for her life she was.
Right.
That she would just.
And even the prosecution asks her, and I'm again quoting straight from trial record. Did you know when he said to drive to that area? Did you know where you were going? She states no. That obviously doesn't match anything that she said.
At what point did she know where she was?
She states that she didn't know until they got to it's an intersection called 96th and Q Street, which is approximately, I would say, 2 blocks, maybe 3 blocks from the apartments where the victim lived. When they get to that intersection, she said that's when he says, "I need to talk to Tina."
Right.
That's what she said on trial, and yeah.
But that was her first statement or her last statement? Which statement was that?
No, that was her last statement.
Okay. So at that point now, she's saying, as they're approaching this, I need to go talk to Tina.
Right.
So that's when she's implying now she knows where she's going.
Right.
All right, so she takes him to Tina's. At what point did she realize that he had done something dreadful?
According to her, let me find it here in one of these various reports that she gives. Okay. Howard further stated that she was scared and did not know what Burries was referring to, nor did she know Burries may have just killed Tina.
Okay. So, was she ever asked, how did he present himself upon return to the vehicle once he had left Tina's house? How did he present himself?
Originally, she states their drive from Council Bluffs back to the place that it was normal. And then she states that when he gets into the car, he tells her to drive, at which point she drives. But she says she tried not to make too much eye contact with him because he looked upset, is what she said. And that was in her second statement, I believe. By the time we get to the final statement and what she testified to, she says that he gets in the car, immediately tells her not to look at him, but that he's got this look in his eye, which I don't know how you're not looking at somebody who has a look in their eye, but anyway, I'm going to just leave that alone. Tells him not to look at him, so she doesn't look at him. Tells her to drive. Has her pull over. Tells her the part about being an accessory.
Hold on,
she's
1
not
second.
looking at him this whole time.
No. She doesn't look in her eye. She doesn't look in his eye, because he's told her not to look in his eye. But she can tell what the look in his eye is, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay.
He's got the look in his eye. Yep.
The look that she can't see because she didn't look in his eye, right?
Right.
Okay, carry on.
And then she drives over the bridge into Council Bluffs, at which point she says he rolls the window down. She can see out of the peripheral vision. She's not looking at him, but she can see out of her peripheral vision that he has rolled the window down and he throws something out of the car. She doesn't hear it. She doesn't see it. She doesn't know what it is. She just knows he threw something out of the car.
Okay. Okay. Let's stop there and take a break for a minute. Let me well, not even take a break. Let me ask you another question. What was his motive? What are they suggesting was his motive for killing her?
Because according to the text messages on Thursday morning, he was coming over to get sex with her, and she said no, she was tired and wanted to go to bed.
So hang on a minute. He takes one of his girlfriends to take her to the house to have sex with her, but she was tired. And because she was tired,
Right.
he kills her and goes back to the girlfriend in the car.
No, what they're saying is that Thursday morning, which Friday morning is when they said, 3 o'clock Friday morning is when they said that he did this. So Thursday morning they're saying that he was texting her and said he was coming over. She said, I'm going to bed. I've been at work all night. I want to get some sleep. I have to work at 3 o'clock or whatever, and don't come over.
But he was seeing 10 other women, so he wasn't desperate for a woman to sleep with.
Well, no, and that's just it. He had intercourse with the girl that took him there that Thursday before he went to the bar, and that Thursday night before he went to the bar. And on Wednesday night into Thursday morning, where he's texting the victim, he's laying in bed with the other girl that he's dating. I mean, sex was not.
No, sex
Not
was
an
not
issue
something
for
that
him to get.
absolutely not. So there's no way.
And my thing was this too. If it was an issue of you're denying me sex and I'm going to come and get what I want, and we did vaginal swabs, why didn't you test them?
Yeah. And why wasn't there? That's what he went there for. So why wasn't there any evidence of that taking place? Him taking advantage of her or forcing himself. But mind you, obviously he didn't have enough time because he only had enough time to kill her, right? The 5 minutes that it took him to get in there and get back to the car. So it would have been impossible for him to have had the sex and kill her in that 5 minutes. So it had to be one or the other, and they chose for it to be that time that he killed her, right?
Correct.
I'm ridiculing this because I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I'm speechless as I'm looking at this issue. It's beyond me how we get a conviction on this, how we even get a jury to hear this out, and why this wasn't thrown out.
To be honest with you, I'm going to tell you right now, I think a big problem with our system, the system here in the United States of America, is you have your pre-trial, and what happens in a pre-trial, those detectives can come up and say what they want to say. They do not have to produce evidence of what they're saying. So there were a lot of things in the beginning of this, that there were witnesses that saw him leaving covered in blood, that, there were witnesses that saw him burn the clothes, that saw him make a statement where he said, I just had to beat Tina's ASS and now I'm burning these clothes. I mean, this was all presented at his pre-trial. This is all stuff that they had no evidence of and never existed. That's how they got him in. That's how he was arraigned to begin with. Without that, you have nothing.
It sounds like they still have nothing.
No, they didn't. I mean, because none of that ever existed. They actually had a witness, and I believe I sent you a copy of that, and I know I posted it on his page, that did a police lineup and said he was, a year later, 90% sure, he was sure this was the man that he met that was Tina's boyfriend, that Tina talked about all the time. And they didn't point Tony out. They didn't pick Tony, but they let that man get in the courtroom, point to Tony, and say that this was Tina's boyfriend that he had met.
Wow.
Had never met Tony, didn't know Tony from Adam, and did not, and Tony was the only one in an orange jumpsuit in the lineup. There was nobody else in an orange jumpsuit.
I was bound to stand out.
Yeah.
You know, the more I hear on these stories, the more speechless I am. So now we get to a point where they've brought about this case. He's been taken to the house. He's come back and he's threatened her with revenge or whatever it is. If she was to open her mouth, she's not to say anything. And she would be an accessory. So in him saying that she would be an accessory, that automatically implicates her to the crime.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So,
well,
first, he's admitting that he's committed a crime. And secondly, in what he's said to her, right, that she is now complicit to the crime, and she did not go straight to the police station after she dropped him off and go, please help me. But he just threatened me, he just killed somebody else, and I'm so scared that he's going to come and kill me next. In fact, she kept this all to herself, said nothing, made a statement that didn't suggest anything like this, and then was forced to make another statement where all of a sudden her information started to deviate. And now all of a sudden she's now scared for her life. This has happened and that has happened. He's threatened her and told her to keep her mouth shut, and she didn't see anything. And you know, if she opens her mouth, then she would all... So does she say anything about how she felt? That she felt that... Because let's just get it right. You take me to a property, you go off and kill somebody. I really didn't know that that's what you were going to do. But you come back to the vehicle and you say, right, I've just killed somebody upstairs. And you now must keep your mouth quiet. Otherwise, you are complicit and you will be found guilty alongside me. Now, even if you're scared of that individual, even if the individual scares you in the way that they've presented themselves at this moment because they're that possessed, obsessive or whatever, the moment you've got rid of that person, not knowing that that's what you were going to be involved with, not knowing that that's where they're going to take you and that we're going to lead you, or that's how they were going to treat you, but now knowing that this is what they've said and this is how it's going to be, you are now petrified. But surely you would know that there's absolutely no way that anybody would hold you responsible for that, what that maniac did. Would you not just run 1,000,000 miles as fast as you could?
I would go to the police station immediately and stay there until they picked him up.
That's it. Because
I was that scared. I certainly am not taking my child and leaving him there for you. And you're not coming into my parents' house where you could possibly do a multiple homicide.
Absolutely not.
I don't understand that at all.
Kill my child, kill my mother. You're coming nowhere near me. In fact, I parked my car 10 blocks away and turned all the lights out. I'm not even home.
Right. And it's funny, his lawyer asks her, she states when she drops him off back home in the court, she states that Anthony invited her inside because there's the time, she says, where they're in the car, 5 or 7 minutes and there's no movement. And he's asking what's going on. And she said, well, Anthony invited me inside the house. And he said, so you mean to tell me this man that told you not to look at him, that supposedly is covered in blood because you're not looking at him because he's covered in blood, invited you into his house? He said, did he change his clothes before he invited you in? Did he go somewhere and wash up before he invited you in? Are there no lights in his house? I mean, I don't understand. Why does someone who tells you not to look at them because they're covered in blood invite you into their lighted house?
Now, somebody covered in blood, having committed an horrific, horrendous, dreadful murder, drenched and covered in blood. Pray tell me, where did all that evidence go?
Well, according to them, he burned it. But they tore his fireplace apart and never found anything. So it's a theory. They worked off a straight theory that he burned it.
Okay.
No evidence that he burned anything.
Okay, so they have this theory. But we all know that theories don't send people to jail. Unless you're black.
Right.
So theories don't send people to jail. What did they use to corroborate their story? What did they use?
About the burning of the clothes?
About the burning of the clothes and whatever happened to the blood. What?
Because they never said anything about the blood. That never, his lawyer didn't question him about that. And it was, everything they went through was like, well, was there blood? You tested this. Was this blood? No, it wasn't blood. Well, you tested this on his shoe. Was this blood? No, it wasn't blood. Well, you tested, all these things that they supposedly tested, there was never blood. There was never any blood. Except for the blood that was obviously in her apartment.
Wow. Okay, so now poor Anthony's in court. He's listening to all of this. The jury are being manipulated and presented with all of this evidence. Did Anthony ever give any understanding, implication, or whatever as to how he felt the verdict might go once the jury retired to consider their verdict?
We honestly, to be honest with you, when the verdict was read, he was in such shock. He fell right back into his chair and just kind of sat there. Like, we did not expect that. Even though we had an all-white jury, the only evidence that was presented was from the coroner. And there were witnesses that saw her alive after she was dead. And I guess we gave more credit to the jury than we should have, thinking that they would weed out all of the hearsay and the things that didn't exist, and they would pay more attention to the actual evidence, the facts that were presented. So we were not expecting that, to be honest with you, at all. Especially, they were given the option of first degree, second degree, manslaughter, manslaughter with intent, I think, and accidental homicide. So we definitely never thought first degree. At some point, because they were an all-white jury, I remember having a conversation stating, I wouldn't be surprised if you get manslaughter, because they have to put somebody away. And, so at that point, that's where I thought they would go with it. We were not willing to take any kind of deal at that point, and we did not want those other things on the table. We wanted straight murder one on the table, and that was it. However, that was not our choice. But they did find him guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, with no evidence.
Wow. So, let's talk about this witness just for another minute. Since his conviction, is there anything that she has said that justifies why she may well have given the statement that she gave?
No, there's nothing. Her behavior since then, she testified on trial that she hated him and she wanted to see him gone for the rest of his life. And she testified to that on the stand. Since the trial, I don't know how to say it, she was going and taking her son to see him. Before he was convicted, while we were in trial, she helped sell things to pay for his attorney. She did weird. She's just, it's off the rocker, the things that happened. When Tony and I became engaged and it became public, she sent him a long email stating she wouldn't be bringing her son anymore to visit him, because we were going to have our family and she would just not bring his son to visit him. I don't know what happened from there, but I know Tony did convince her to start bringing the boy back up to see him. And then since I created the Justice for Anthony page, she's since also said, unless I take that page down, she's not going to bring her son back up to see him. Because it does talk a lot about her testimony and the things that she said that were untrue, and it does present a lot of her statements that the jury never got to see all of the other statements that she made.
Well, so Anthony sits down in the dock. The jury returns his verdict. He is absolutely gobsmacked as to how they could possibly come back with a guilty verdict. But nonetheless, that's what they've done. He's now been sentenced to jail for life with no parole. How did he take that?
He called me later that day and he said, I don't know that he even remembered. He said, what happened? And I kind of had to tell him all over again what had happened in trial. And to be honest with you, we kind of just dug in and started and looking at the appeal. That's what we did. We knew, at this point, that's your next step. So there was no time for him, I don't think, to really. We knew what happened. We knew what was going wrong. We had written letters to the ACLU. We had written letters to the boards, lawyer boards, before we ever even went to trial. So let's just get it right.
At the time of his conviction, was you and him together now?
No.
Were you seeing each other at all?
Yeah, we were visiting and we were talking and we were definitely headed in that direction. I believed he was innocent, even not being with him from the time that the investigators came and spoke to me. I told them I believed he was innocent. And, I even had the story from them that they had the murder weapon. They had his fingerprints. His DNA was all over the murder weapon. And I still told them, I just don't see it. I don't think he did it. Of course, we know that was a lie. They never had any of that. But at this time, we're working towards that. Yeah. We believed, the Lord was going to had a plan. And that we just had to be strong and maintain our faith. And that eventually he was going to bring glory to himself through this. So,
in the last 3 or 4 years, how has his demeanor been? How has he been? What sort of strengths do you think that he's utilized in order to sustain him?
I believe he's utilized his relationship with the Lord probably more than anything. Daily being in the Word and prayer. That's helped him, I believe, more than anything, more than I could, more than anybody could. We went on to the appeal. We appealed to the Nebraska Supreme Court. Immediately, that's where any kind of murder conviction with that kind of a sentence is your direct appeal is to the Supreme Court in the state of Nebraska. So we did that. They came back with an opinion stating that they believe that some of the things that were allowed into trial should not have been allowed into trial. However, they did not believe that it was enough to have swayed the jury's mind. So they did not, we did not get any luck there. So now we are currently looking for a lawyer to do our post-conviction relief and also file for an evidentiary hearing to introduce some of the new evidence that we have found out that the lead detective on his case was under suspension during the time of his investigation for tampering with another case. He was found by the Internal Affairs with conduct unbecoming an officer, tampering, some other things. I don't know if I sent you a copy of that report as well.
Well, what do you know? A bent cop exposed again.
Yeah. So we found that out. So we have that. And like I said, we also have the state witnesses come forward since. And her testimony was very strong. And the Supreme Court opinion cited her testimony in its opinion. So I believe that her coming forward and admitting that the prosecution forced her to lie on the stand is hopefully very strong in our favor to get a new trial.
Well, that's just amazing stuff right there. How has his family been in this time while he's been incarcerated and fighting for his life?
His direct family, or as in me and the kids?
No, his direct family.
His direct family really does not have anything. I don't know how to say. His direct family really is all about themselves. He's not out, and there's nothing that he can do for them at this time, so he's of no use to them, if I can put it in that manner. They have not helped any way, shape, or form. One or two members of his extended family have helped a little bit, but other than that, they don't visit him. They don't write him. They're not try to be any encouragement at all to him. Mostly it's me and the kids that visit him and write and try to support him and help him.
And how are the kids coping with all of this?
The younger ones just ask a lot, when is dad coming home? When's my dad coming home? And will he be home for my next birthday? My youngest son, Marcus, made him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and put it in the freezer, and it's been sitting there for about 6 months. He's saving it for his dad.
Yeah, I think what you need to be doing is you need to just be continually making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and replacing the old ones and just trying to keep it fresh, because I don't think that stale one's going to cut it. Do you?
I don't think so either. I think it's just a point. It's every time anything that they go to the store, they find things that they know their dad likes to eat. They want to buy them and save them for their dad. I'm sure he'll have a treasure trove of unhealthy, ruined, spoiled food when he comes home. But the older girls, I know that this last decision was really hard on them, being 16 and 15, a junior and a sophomore, especially my oldest daughter, knowing that now this next process may take a couple years. She knows that by the time he comes home, she'll be gone. And so she's missed since she turned 13, the day of her 13th birthday, actually, to be exact. He's been gone. So it's very hard on the older girls.
No child should be without their father, and everybody knows that a girl's, her dad's her idol. How has he been with you? Is he looking to challenge and correct his infidelity behavior, or
Yes, that's not even a question anymore. That's something hopefully we've moved. I feel like we've moved past, and so it's not a question. Now we deal with normal things. How to discipline the kids appropriately. What's the correct punishment for this or for that? Normal everyday things. So,
were you a woman of faith when you met him, or did your faith come into line once he started seeking the Lord?
No, I was saved at a young age. When I was 5 years old, my mother led me to the Lord. My dad is a pastor. My brothers, all three, I have three that are pastors, and I have one that is a missionary to Uganda.
Wow.
So I was raised in a Christian home. Not to say that everybody that's raised in a Christian home has faith just because their parents have faith or has a personal relationship with the Lord, but I do.
Could anybody suggest that he was using you for your Christianity and your gullibility to try and pull the wool over your eyes to support him?
No.
Or would you be able to see through that if he was?
I believe so.
How genuine do you feel is this relationship with him now, with you and him? Because it's been so fragile over this time. What convinces you?
I think that the difference now is we have a friendship that we never had before. It's not just, we met, it was, we never really, we never had time to have a friendship. And now we've had to take the time because the other things, the intimacy, the physical, is not there. So you have to take the time. Now you build a friendship. You build common ground on faith and family.
Right.
And so I think that that's a huge difference.
And so you and the kids go up and visit him. How often do you visit him now?
I try to visit twice a week. They have him in Lincoln, which is about an hour from me. So between my girls play high school volleyball, so between volleyball and work and church and everything, I do try to get up there. It's at least once a week, but I try if I can financially and time-wise to get there twice a week.
And that's amazing and committed. Look, we're coming to the end of the show now, and it's amazing how quickly 2 hours can fly by, especially when you're just talking on radio. But I did warn you that this would be like a conversation between two friends that just happens to be recorded. So if anybody wanted to get on board and support the Justice for Anthony, where would they go to? Where would they find you, and where would they find the information that they needed in order for them to support?
They can contact me through the Facebook page, Justice for Anthony. Mm-hmm. There's a direct link on there to my email.
Okay. And do you have fresh legal support supporting you in your appeal now?
Not right now. Just having been burned by the first attorney, we're really seeking the Lord's wisdom in the next attorney, knowing that this is after your post-conviction, there's a lot of little appeals that you can file, habeas corpus and federal and things like this. This is it. This is your big shot.
Have you not contacted any of the groups or organizations such as the Innocence Projects or anything like that? Does nobody not come on board?
We have contacted the Innocence Project. We've contacted the Centurion Group. I think that Anthony personally wrote Barry Scheck a letter. We've contacted quite a few of the groups. Anyone that we know of, we've contacted. Probably at least, 20 or 30 packets that I sent out to different places. We've contacted Dateline, 48 Hour Mysteries, anywhere we just want to put some light on it. I think if we can get some light on it, we'll get the help. The problem with the Innocence Project is that they have so many people, with him just now, he has not exhausted all of his appeals yet. And a lot of times they do not help until you have exhausted all of your appeals.
Well, if there's anything else that we can do for you, please do not hesitate to contact us either on Issues Today, World Jam Global Radio. You have all the information available to you for us to continue to support you in your plight to help exonerate Anthony in this absolutely dreadful and terrible mishap that has cost him 3 to 4 years of his life already, and every day that goes by that he's not free is a day too much.
Right. There is if anyone is listening and would like to contact the mayor of Omaha, Nebraska, her name is Mayor Jean Stothard, and her line is 402-444-5555.
Well, Catherine, we're gonna say goodbye now, but I'll be downloading the recording of this show for you, and I'll be posting it, sending you the link later on, so that you can feel free to share it with your loved ones and your family members, knowing that we've done what we can on this end, that England is listening, the United Kingdom is listening, World Jam Global Radio is listening, Issues Today is listening, and Kervin Julian has definitely, you've got my attention.
Thank you so much.
Catherine, thank you very much for your time. It's all we've got time for on this week's edition of Issues Today, Wrong Time for Death, Justice for Anthony. We're out of here.
World Jam Global Radio, this is Clarity.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for.
Oh, that was one compelling story from Catherine Prettyman.
I paid for my crime.
Wrong time for death.
For my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals.
Well, I'll be back tomorrow morning for my Wake Up Everybody Sunday Gospel Show, where we do church before church on World Jam Global Radio from 8 till 10 GMT.
And very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole
But don't forget to join me next Saturday night for another edition of Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
We'll be talking to Celeste,
Did my time. I paid for my crime.
a wrongful conviction and social justice advocate.
Crime.
She's got about 3 or 4 cases that we're going to be reviewing
My crime.
right here on World Jam Global Radio. Issues Today next Saturday night, same time.
My crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime.
I just want to thank Catherine Pretterman again for sharing her story with us on World Jam Global Radio.
Already did
And as you heard, you can find her on Justice for Anthony, which is a Facebook page.
Baby, my crime, baby, my crime, baby, my crime, baby, my crime. Already did my
It's amazing how many innocent people are rotting in the jails of the United States of America for crimes we know they did not commit. They could not have committed.
so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good.
Quite sure we'll be updating you on this and many more.
Swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't
Hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of
spend it all in shit.
Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio. I hope you've been informed.
Already did
I hope you've been educated.
for my crime.
I hope you feel passionate about the things that we feel passionate about.
Time. I paid for my
And feel free to share your story with us on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio.
crime.
www.worldjamglobalradio.com,
Time. I
or you can find me on Issues Today at World Jam Global Radio.
did my time. I paid for my crime.
Also find us on Twitter at Issues Today Radio.
Drugs and Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb. My brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time, already did my time. I paid for my crime, already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Well, trying to cope with this living hell. Trying to cope with this living hell. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Trying to cope.
As for me, my dear friends, I'm out of here. Good night. God bless you.